Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I'm Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a bright and compassionate 19-year-old son, Joey, who is struggling to launch. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. We are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. I'm very excited to introduce our guest, Jack MacCarthy, who labels himself on his website as a writer, performer, and professional queer. 11 years ago, Jack gave birth to a son, chose adoption, and relinquished him to a gay male couple. 5 years ago, Jack began transitioning his gender. In this conversation, Jack will be talking about his unique role in the adoption space as a trans man and a birth mom. So I'm very grateful you're here to talk about your life and your experiences, Jack. Thank you for being on Unraveling Adoption.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you are my, second trans man on the pod. I'm happy to say, out of over 100 pod episodes, I think that I really want to elevate LGBTQ voices as much as possible. So I'm very grateful that you're on to share your story. And as most people might know, if they've listened to our pod, I am a lesbian married to a woman who's a stepmom to our son. And I'm very much flying the rainbow flag over here. So I want to do whatever I can to support everyone, and particularly trans people, I think, are getting the raw end of the deal right now in our culture. So I want to elevate your voice. So let's just find out a little bit about your background. I know you're in theater now and actor, performer. Were you one of those theater kids?
Yeah, I would say I'm more of a lapsed theater kid now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Also funny to hear myself referred to as a trans man. It's not wrong. I don't know. It's a weird... Wow, that sounds so grown up.
Trans boy? Was you trans kid?
I also identify as both trans and non-binary, and I use both he and they pronouns. Okay. And theater was definitely a place where I was exploring gender before I was exploring it in the real life, more serious, more... Oh, maybe the fact that I've been making gender bending theater for decades means something.
So for a long time, maybe you were playing opposite gender roles and just thinking, well, that's what you get to do as an actor. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm more of a writer than a performer, though I am both. But my senior project in college, which then became my first play to be professionally produced after college, was called The All-American Genderfuck Cabaret.
Nice.
It was about exploding gender stereotypes, and there was a non-binary character at the center of it. And I started creating this in 2006.
Oh, wow.
And it was 2018 before I started being, oh, maybe I'm non-binary.
Okay, so you didn't identify it that way, but you were just extremely interested in it, passionate. That came out in your writing, but you weren't even clear that that was you were writing about.
Correct.
Isn't that
correct.
Interesting? Well, your subconscious knew.
It did. Yeah, we tell on ourselves. We don't know it necessarily, but we tell on ourselves.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's funny. And what was your family life when you grew up? Were they super accepting of gay people or trans people, or was it on the radar? No.
Nope.
Okay. Enough said.
Catholic, conservative, but very encouraging of artistry, very encouraging of creativity. So a both expressive and repressive environment. Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah. A long time ago, I used to work at Disneyland, which is this iconic place of family values and da-da-da-da-da. People from the Midwest send their families on vacation there. And do they know that over half of the people that work here are super gay and trans, and just, do they know where all this creativity comes from? I just wonder. And if they knew, would they still come? I don't know.
I've been wondering about that lately. Why is it that queer people are so often in the arts? It's something that we just take as a given, but what's that about? What's the correlation? It's so interesting to me.
Is that the only place they feel comfortable to express themselves, or are they particularly talented? I don't know. That's a good question. Stay tuned for part 2.
A little column B.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So you were always creative, doing theater, and one of those wacky arty kids. And your parents liked the arts part, but did you have any gay friends? Did you gay people or trans people?
I had a gay uncle, but we didn't really talk about that. By we, I mean me and my uncle.
Oh.
I don't think I would have known he was gay if my parents hadn't told me.
Oh, okay. It wasn't out.
And it was a combination of them trying to be sensitive about him, but also clearly disapproving. And I had a gay friend in high school, but I didn't come out as bisexual until my senior year of high school was almost over, including to myself.
Okay. So I'm almost out of here. I'm going to drop this bomb right here and see what happens, right?
It was more so I went to a Catholic youth group retreat, and there was a queer girl on this retreat with me, and youth group was actually a really great affirming place, not nearly as stringent about rules or oppressive as the rest of the Catholic Church can be, but there was a group therapy-esque aspect to it. There would be an empty chair in the middle of the circle, and any of us could go up and talk to the chair and mentally put whoever we needed to say something to in that chair, a parent or God or whoever, and the rest of the group didn't have to understand what you were saying or the context of it, but you were being held in support by the circle.
Nice.
And there was this girl, and I sat down and she was rubbing my back and kind of using her fingernails. And she was like, "It's okay. Jesus loves you." And I was just having feelings about being touched that way that had nothing to do with being consoled or Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like,
she outed me to myself.
Okay. Oh, that was an interesting retreat, I bet. All right.
It sure was.
Yes. And you were a senior in high school when that happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then you went to college for theater or something like that. And
yes.
Were there a lot more LGBTQ people that you ran across in college?
So many more.
Yeah. Theater program.
And plenty more have come out since then.
Yeah.
A lot of us who knew we were queer in college have come out as trans or non-binary since college. Yeah.
Is that a typical route to come out as either lesbian or bisexual or gay or whatever you are to start with? And then, and by the way, I'm also non-binary and trans.
It seems it. I work for the Outwards Archive, which is a oral history project collecting the stories of LGBTQ plus elders all over the United States through on-camera interviews. And it is a pattern I hear a lot where someone will come out first as a lesbian and then as a trans man. I have no idea the stats, but it does seem to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems our culture is a little bit better at accepting gay people now. It seems,
and yet getting worse by the minute.
It does not rest on that at all. It's my wife and I are afraid our marriage is going to get taken away from us. So we're definitely not just sitting still on this. But it seems, I don't know. I look at my family or people I grew up with, and they're fine with gay people. Trans people, for some people that are just realizing what's going on, that might be tougher. So I wonder sometimes if people take that in stages.
Yeah, I think everyone got very on board with love is love.
Yeah.
And I think even some gay, lesbian, and bisexual people have a hard time with accepting and embracing the trans community.
Yeah. And just to be really clear with everyone, because it took me a while to figure this out, the L and the G and the B part are about who you love, who you want to have sex with. And the T and the Q and the plus and the plus and the plus, most of those are about your gender, which is separate, a whole separate thing. There really are two separate things, but we sort of all get under the same umbrella, which is fine. But is that your assessment too?
Well, my assessment is if we had more and better words, maybe we wouldn't need to all be under the same umbrella, but most of our words for sexual orientation are just about gender. There's no word for I'm sexually attracted to only people with long eyelashes, or I'm not even necessarily within kink. There's not necessarily a word for attracted to dominant people, submissive, but maybe you're not submissive. Maybe you're a dominant person who's attracted to other dominant people, or maybe you're a switch who's attracted to dominant people. So because the language makes sexual orientation so focused on gender, then if you're trans, then no matter what, you're going to be perceived at some point as queer, even if you're attracted to the same people the whole time, which also can change with transition. Some people get on hormones and they're like, oh, now I never was really into dudes before, but suddenly I'm very interested in men. But even if that doesn't happen, even if you're attracted to the same people the whole time, then you're perceived as a gay man at some point, then as a straight woman at one point, or vice a lesbian at one point, and then a straight man at some point.
It's very confusing and complicated. And it's partly the labels, and this is going to be important with our discussion regarding adoption, which is coming right up. But these labels and putting people in boxes is problematic, and forcing people into boxes that the culture has decided are important.
Yeah, I'm a millennial, and I observe Gen Z just creating more and more words because the words that we have don't feel quite at home in.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful, even when it's also a lot to keep up with. But I think what is difficult about words, labels, boxes is trying to find the balance between too open and too closed. So a word has to, almost by definition, exclude something in order to have any meaning. But you also don't want people who are feeling resonance with that word to be left out, even if they don't necessarily fit the quote unquote definition of it perfectly. And definitions are a slippery concept anyway, because words really just mean how people use them.
Right. But I'm just learning the pronouns. Now you're making me learn some more stuff. Oh no, it's okay. We can learn new things. It's okay.
English speakers, we've been using pronouns literally our entire lives. Yes. It's not that new.
Right. And we've been using the plural singular business, they, them thing forever, which people just don't realize that we do it all the time.
Did it.
Yeah. So this is all very interesting. Where was your life when you got pregnant, and were you wanting to get pregnant? Was it a complete surprise?
Complete surprise. I decided to throw myself a half birthday party because my birthday is July 3rd. I'm a Cancer baby. And I would try to have birthday parties for myself, but people would often be out of town for the 4th of July. So I decided I was going to throw myself a half birthday party and got very drunk and hooked up with someone. And then 2.5 weeks later was feeling, oh, my body is doing something different. I found out very early. And I was not just broke. I had defaulted on multiple student loans and multiple credit cards. And my wages were being garnished 25%. And I was only making $30,000 a year to begin with, which even in 2012 wasn't that much. And I was living with roommates, and the apartment was such a good deal. Moving didn't seem a thing that could actually realistically happen. Just so many reasons why adding a kid to the mix didn't seem realistic. And I also had decided to start my own theater company that year. I was just getting started as a theater artist in New York. So I pretty quickly thought adoption was the way I would go. I'm very pro-choice. I hate it when people try to latch onto my story to try to support a anti-abortion agenda. That is, let me just be so clear that that's not what I'm about. But the Catholic upbringing, I had some lingering feeling that to get an abortion was an inherently scary or thing I didn't want for myself. I just didn't want one.
Yeah. And one can be very pro-choice, but choose not to do that for themselves. That totally makes sense.
Yes. So I went to Planned Parenthood to take another pregnancy test just to make sure it hadn't been a false positive. And I told the social worker I met with there that I was interested in adoption. And she gave me the pamphlet for the adoption agency I ended up working with.
Okay. And was that, while you were pregnant, was that a good experience? Did you feel supported?
By the adoption agency?
Yeah.
Very much so. My social worker really emphasized that, I mean, she wouldn't even have used the term birth mother for me yet because, you know, you're only a birth mother once you actually place.
Right.
And she said, sometimes the best solution is to parent, is to raise the kid. And we looked at what would that mean what would that look like? Who would I have to ask for favors? What would my options be? And so there was a not necessarily great, but doable plan for if I decided to parent.
Okay.
But even once I gave birth and met my son, and then it became absolutely devastating to be apart from my son, I felt very strongly that the best outcome for him was to place with this gay couple that the adoption agency had connected me with.
Okay.
And I still feel that was the right choice, even if it also came from having a different perspective than I do now. I think I just thought, well, I don't really see how I could financially support both me and my kid and also be an artist. And I'm very scared about what not being an artist would do to me and would do to my son.
Yeah.
So it's really easy when you're that broke to look at, wow, they paid the equivalent of my yearly salary to be clients of this adoption agency. They're going to be able to take care of any emergencies that come up in a way that I can't guarantee for myself.
So I'm hearing that you made this as a conscious choice. You were not like the women in the 60s that were completely coerced and forced to relinquish. And I don't hear the agency is manipulating you. I think that still sometimes happens where they take people and manipulate them. But I feel with your story, you're choosing this. If you had had different life circumstances or socioeconomic support, things might have been different. But from your perspective at that moment, that really was the best option for you. Does that sum up what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very glad that you don't have the coercion part to deal with, because I know that must just really rip people apart. And I'm sure it's still very difficult for you to have lost your son to adoption, right? Or do you even call it that? Losing your son to adoption or choosing adoption?
I wouldn't say I lost him. Maybe I've used that terminology, but I don't usually.
Is it an open adoption?
It's an open adoption.
So you still have a connection with him?
Yeah, I see him all the time, once a month or so.
Oh, wow. Very good.
Yeah.
And what is your relationship with this gay couple? And did you pick them out of a book or something? Or how did you?
I literally picked them out of a book.
Kat, I was going shopping, right?
It's so weird.
It is.
I don't know if you've covered this on the podcast before, but in my case, it was a plastic binder and each family has one sheet and it's got a picture of them and it's got info on their ethnicity and their occupation and their religion and how open of an adoption they're open to, and a letter to the birth mother, not me specifically, but just any birth mother that might be looking at their page. And all the letters really sound the same.
Yeah, it's a lot like a casting director's pile of resumes, right? With the headshot.
Or online dating.
Yeah. Oh, I remember making my little album. I sent an album to Japan and putting pictures of our Yamaha piano, because we went to Japan to get our son. Yamaha piano and our Sony TV and the Lexus in the driveway. See, those are Japanese things, so they always better. The things that we had to do were, we want this, we want a child so bad, so we're going to make ourselves look as good as possible. It's just really, it's very strange. It's very awkward from all angles, and I don't know a better way to do it, but it does feel very strange. So you studied all of these people, went through the catalog, and picked this gay couple, and has it turned out to be a good choice?
Yes, a number of things have made me feel this was meant to be. One of the things that made me feel that way was that their page wasn't even in the book yet. They dropped off their page for the book while I was looking at families. And my social worker walked in with their page and set it down, hot off the press. And another piece that makes me feel a little spooky, fated, is one of them is a theater artist. And he had this solo show. And I was supposed to see this solo show because I was a judge for the indie theater off Broadway equivalent of the Tonys.
Okay.
And I was in the right part of town at the correct time, but I thought curtain was an hour later than it was. And I think the show was only an hour long. So by the time I showed up at the box office, they were like, oh yeah, this started at 7. I missed it. And now I'm actually really glad that I did not know his work artistically beforehand, because I saw the show later and loved it, but who knows how I would have felt about it in the moment, because at the end of the day, that's not relevant.
Yeah. Okay.
Or maybe it would have felt, oh, it's too close to home. We have these overlapping circles and I want to start fresh with someone. I don't know, but I'm glad that I didn't see it.
Okay. Interesting.
So those were two coincidences that made it feel extra meant to be. And I definitely have a better relationship with them than I think a lot of birth parents have with their kids' adoptive parents.
Nice.
I can bring up things that are feeling difficult or uncomfortable for me, and we can just engage with things a little more. And we also have a lot in common. There's the theater artist one, and then there's the surgeon dad.
Okay.
And less in common with the surgeon dad, but certainly plenty in common with theater dad, and both of us being queer. And it feels there's a lot that we can relate to each other about. And I think that queer adoptive parents might have more of an open mind about what the relationship with the birth parents can look like, because they've always known they were going to have to make their family in a non-traditional way.
I never thought about that.
Whose traditions, etc. But what I've heard from other birth mothers as a feeling of competition or resentment between adoptive mothers and birth mothers especially can make those relationships very hard. And I just haven't had to deal with that or experience that.
Yeah, I think that is a real thing, that adoptive mother to the birth mother is something about mothers very protective and mama bear territorial.
And also the fact that our culture has such a thing about being a mom is what makes you a quote unquote real woman, being able to conceive specifically. And so you've been told that there's this one way to be legitimate, and then there's someone to threaten that. Patriarchy.
Yes. So I don't know if you know Rich Erlob, but he wrote a musical about adoption. One of the songs is called Real Mother, and it is the adoptive mom and the birth mom of this child singing together, that they both don't feel the real mom for different reasons. It's very touching. I'm going to try to sing it. Well, and when you relinquished your son, you were just a cis woman at that time.
I thought so.
Or bisexual woman. Is that what you would have?
Bisexual woman is how I identified at the time.
So how did these gay guys, your child's parents, how did they take the news that you were transitioning?
I honestly don't remember when and how I told them, but they took a long time to make the change to my name and pronouns and still struggle with it.
Okay. So are they accepting of you, but just sometimes forget, or are they doing it on purpose?
They're accepting of me and they just forget.
Yeah. And if it's okay to ask, how is your son dealing with your transition?
I think it's mostly a non-issue for him. He also struggled somewhat with name and pronouns, but he's pretty fluent at this point. And I still like being called mom.
Okay.
He wrote me a Mother's Day card addressed to Jack/mom that I have on my wall.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I feel like if I were more binary trans, if I were less non-binary, that it's possible it might be harder for him.
So explain what that means. If you were presenting completely as male-ish, is that what you're talking about?
Not even about how I present, but how I identify. If I didn't feel comfortable with the word mom, if I was just, I am a man and you will that's
I see.
But since they, them pronouns are also very much in the mix, and I do feel comfortable with the term birth mother, because I'm not sure what he would call me if I wasn't comfortable with the word mom or birth mother.
Yes. It's awkward because you birthed him.
I did.
There's a real thing there that happened. And so there's some interesting issues there. But it sounds like the four of you are open to talking about all of it, which is amazing and wonderful, even though I'm sure it's sometimes awkward and difficult. But do you appreciate being able to talk about it openly with all of the people in your life?
Yeah, usually these kinds of conversations come from me, and I think in the perfect world, I wouldn't always be the one to initiate more difficult conversations. But I think the reason for that is because they generally are just feeling things are fine. And I'm more likely to be the person who doesn't feel things are fine.
Okay.
But
Well, you're the one that has made the shift, a major life shift, and they're just going along their own same road, right? So you're the one that has to say, "Hey guys, let's talk about
yeah,
whatever is bothering you." Yeah, that's understandable. But I'm glad at least you're able to talk to them about it. I'm sure it's not always easy, for sure.
yeah.
What's it been like in adoption spaces? Do you go to birth mom groups?
There's a birth mother gathering in New York that I used to go to every year when I lived there. And almost every single one of them had no idea what to do with they, them pronouns or with the idea of trans. And so largely, I just wouldn't bring it up. We're all here because we have a uterus and a specific thing happened with our uterus. And then that just felt less and less good over time. Meeting other queer birth mothers is rare enough.
Yeah, you mean just lesbian birth moms?
Lesbian or bi or...
Yeah.
But I've met exactly one other trans or non-binary birthing parent in my life.
Wow.
And they placed under very different circumstances than me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if anyone knows any more, let me know and I'll get you in touch with Jack.
Yes, please.
You can have your own little club.
It really does feel alienating because like I have so little birth parent community to begin with. It's not something where I'm just going to be wandering around in my life and randomly meet another one. It's pretty rare.
Yeah, a lot of birth parents aren't even out as a birth parent or willing to even talk about it. So to get those people to talk about it, did you find most of them are older?
Way more are older.
Okay.
Over the years, I continue to meet a younger one here and there, but the vast majority are older.
Because I do think it's really important to get that silo experience with your people, with people that understand what you went through. But that must be so tricky because the people that went through it with you aren't super accepting or just understanding of your position anymore.
Yeah. I would be on Zoom and have my name and my pronouns right there. And I'm talking about how I'm on testosterone and going by Jack. And then we get to the birth mother dinner and they hand me a poem to read out loud where the first line is, "We are women." I'm like, oh, come on.
Oh.
Especially because I work with LGBT elders in my daily job that are in many cases lifelong learners. And even if they don't understand it, trying to stay up to date on the new language and maintain an understanding of new identities. I'm like, being old is not your excuse. It's not an excuse.
The thing about the adoption community is that I'm a musician too. So I'm in the art field and just everybody in the art field is almost everybody's really open and really pretty liberal and whatever, fly the flag. It's fine. But the adoption community brings together people from just everywhere and all different backgrounds and political stances. And you don't know what you're walking into. The only thing you have in common is that you all were birth mothers in your case. And there can be a lot of other things that are not in common. Whew, that must be tricky to navigate.
It certainly is. Like, I've never met a MAGA birth mother that I know of.
Okay.
Thank God.
So at least you're in New York.
Yeah. I don't have a connection to an adoption community here in LA at all because my whole connection was through my former adoption agency.
Oh, which was local to New York.
Yeah.
All right. And you moved to LA to follow your family, right?
That's
your son and his parents?
It was partly because that's what New York playwrights do, is move to LA and wait for TV so that they can actually make money. But the thing that pushed it over the edge, because that had been a possibility in my mind for years, but a number of things happened at the same time. A 3-year relationship that I was in ended, and my theater collaborators community was dispersing. And then Leo moved to LA. Leo is my son. I forget if I've said that or not. And it took me a year after they moved for me to realize I also had to move here, and then about another year to do it. So 2 years after they moved here, I followed.
Okay. And then COVID happened and now there's a writer's strike. So how are things going for you?
It sure was an interesting time to relocate, but I feel the same way about moving to LA as I did about connecting with the dads. Is it feels the right thing for me, even if at times I have hated it. To be clear, I don't feel like I actively hate any part of my relationship with my son's adoptive parents, but I definitely hated LA.
Got it. Yeah.
I now feel very good about LA, but
okay, good.
Yeah, there was definitely a transition period for sure.
I bet it's so much different. Well, what do you wish that the adoption community understood better about the transgender community and that intersection?
You don't have to use the gendered language. The English language is certainly limited in some ways, but there are other ways in which it is very easy to say people instead of women. It's very easy. It's the same number of syllables. And I really wish that more adoption-centered spaces were making more of an effort to be inclusive in their language. And I think when we think about LGBT people and adoption, I think the first place people's minds go is LGBT adoptive parents.
Sure. Yes. Because that's coming up more and more and more people because they can now.
Yeah. And it makes a good, heartwarming story. Look at this beautiful gay couple that got to adopt a kid.
Yeah.
How beautiful, how lovely.
Yeah.
And I think the idea that birth parents can be LGBTQ is the last thing that occurs to anyone in terms of how adoption and queerness might overlap.
Well, people don't consider the birth mother anyway.
Exactly.
You're the last one anyone thinks about to start with.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're barely considered anyway, let alone the idea that we might be queer.
Yeah.
And so sometimes when I tell other queer people about my experience, their eyes light up because they're imagining themselves as the adoptive parents. They're not imagining themselves in my position. And so I've had this experience repeatedly in queer community and trans community for people to idealize or romanticize my experience and be like, oh, see, look at that. There's so many ways to make family. And there's me before relinquishing my son and me after relinquishing my son. And I had to rebuild myself on a cellular level. I didn't understand how to person. I didn't understand how to talk. I didn't understand anything anymore.
Yeah.
That's what I went through. And queer people are just, oh, beautiful queer family.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah. Not recommended. Really tough. Don't do this unless you really have to, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I call my podcast Unraveling Adoption. I'm trying to get everyone to understand it's not just beautiful and it's not just horrible either.
Right.
Look, you have this lovely family. Your son loves you and you're still in connection. So really wonderful things can happen. I am so grateful that my son is in my life for sure. I love him so much and I've learned so much through parenting him through all of the challenges we've had. So I wouldn't undo any of it, but man, it's not a path I would really recommend for anyone. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. I wouldn't change anything about my experience, even if in some ways I'm more cynical about it than I was when it happened. It's not even so much cynical about my experience. It's cynicism about adoption in general and about this system that takes kids from people without financial resources and gives them to people with financial resources.
That's right. Yeah. If they would have just given that $30,000 to you, if it was really about the child, just give you the $30,000, let you get on your feet and you keep your kid. If it's really about the kid, but it's not really about the kid, it's about creating people's families that have more money than you. So that's really sad. I don't know what to do about that. That's a huge problem. But I wonder, real quick before we wrap up, trans adoptees. I don't know how many of those, but I'm sure there are some. What if you're a parent or a grandparent or just a person listening and maybe an adopted child or just a child is coming out as trans or non-binary? Do you have any advice just for a regular person who is trans?
Recognize that someone coming out to you is a gift. They are inviting you closer. They're being their authentic self with you because they want to be close to you as their authentic self. So take that as the gift that it is. Do your own research, join a PFLAG meeting, talk to other parents or grandparents who have gone through this. You don't have to figure it all out alone, but it's not fair to ask a kid to hold your hand while you figure all this out.
Right. Grown-ups, go do your work, figure it out so you can help them. Because kids, just because they come out as trans doesn't know they know anything about being trans or about their history of LGBTQ people or this whole broader picture of what it's like. They just know what's in their own head and they're just kids usually. So yeah, support. And I love PFLAG. I also know the Pride and Joy Foundation is really great for LGBTQ parents and teachers and things like that. Do you have any other LGBTQ resources you would like to plug?
The Outwards Archive, and that's Outwards spelled out, WORDS, Outwards, has many stories of LGBTQ elders. Like the interviews themselves are 2 hours long with a transcript that you can search. But in case you're not looking to do that deep dive, on our YouTube page, we have a ton of shorter edited videos, just in case you're feeling, oh, this just happened.
Oh, the kids nowadays.
Yeah, kids just came up with this yesterday. Go watch some 80-year-olds talking about their experience as trans people, as queer people, and just learn all the different ways that this can look. Because even among elders, very, very vastly different experiences for different folks in different parts of the country, of different backgrounds, different identities. And they're also really charming and lovely people to spend a few minutes with. I would definitely plug that. Gender Spectrum is a organization geared toward young queer people and the people who love them or work with them. So youth and parents and teachers. And the homepage of their website has, I am a blank looking for blank.
Oh,
it really makes it easy to find the resources that you're looking for. So yeah, those are a couple places I would recommend. Oh, and for people who might be wanting to make a queer family of some sort, the Chosen Family Law Center in New York.
Okay.
It's New York based. I think they also have lawyers who are accredited in New Jersey, but I can't be positive about that. But even just their blog and their resources are a great source of information for queer family making.
Is that the agency you used?
No.
Okay.
I just think they're awesome.
Okay, awesome. Very good. All right. And I know that you have a book out there and a Kindle original, which is an ebook, right?
Yeah.
And then articles and a website. Why don't you give us the best way to get a hold of all of those things?
Sure. My website is jackmaccarthy.com, and McCarthy is spelled MAC. People leave out that first A. And that has links to my book, which is called Squad. It's published under my mortal name before I ascended, which is Mariah McCarthy. And
I love the way you said that.
Yeah, I don't really birth name or dead name. Former name is fine, but that's really what it is. It's my
moral name before I ascended. Yeah. I'm going to start using that.
And my Kindle original published under the same name is My Boy, Their Son, which is about this experience. And yeah, I don't post a lot on Instagram these days, but Jack MacCarthy Writes is my handle if you want to see some really cute pictures of my cat or my partner.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that everyone should go follow you and they can contact you through their website if they really have something to tell you or want to share their support of you or whatever. Very good. Well, you're doing amazing things out in the world. And I'm just so proud of you for just being authentically you and helping all of us understand what it must be to be a trans person that's also in the adoption constellation and how all those intersections just create complexity and some pain and some joy, I'm sure. So, I really appreciate you coming on, Jack. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And listeners, please share this episode with anyone you know that has a trans person in their family or is struggling to understand this topic. Please share this episode. I think Jack's story is very accessible and an easy way for people to start to understand a little bit better. And if you want to support Unraveling Adoption, we have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Unraveling Adoption. And you can donate $5 or $10 a month, and it helps us keep the lights on and keep this a commercial-free podcast. I also have an adoptive parents support group that's free to join. It's called Aptitude, and you can find that at unravelingadoption.com/aptitude. And I really appreciate you all listening. Jack and I want you all to stay safe.